once you start changing your tune and you empathize with the people that you're trying to work with, the conversation becomes a lot easier, because the moment that a brand feels like your motivations don't align with theirs, that they're going to feel threatened. And that is that's a really challenging thing. So you have to put in the work. You have to be talking to the brand, talking to the people that you've lost the trust with, and you have to dive in to what is motivating them and how do you pair it back to them so that they feel like they're being heard. Because ultimately, we all have the same motivations. It's just our delivery could vary.
Welcome to the /, where we lean into the future of IT. I'm your host, Aaron Chesney, with my beautiful co-host, James Carmen. And today's guest is Erica Price.
Hello.
And Erica Price is a UX manager at Yum Brands, where she leads the design of user-focused systems across the restaurant industry. She co-founded SciSummary, an AI tool for simplifying scientific research, in Helix Booking, a wellness booking platform. Erica has over a decade of experience. She's passionate about creating inclusive digital experiences as a teacher and speaker at Memorizely. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
She shares her expertise in UX and product conceptualization, UI design, and accessibility, helping others build user-first products. So welcome, Erica.
Hello.
Good morning, James.
I feel like she, wrote that bio just to mess with you. There were some parts there that were tough.
Definitely some 50-cent words in there.
Literally, yeah. That was the whole goal. To be honest, ChatGPT wrote it. So
user-focused systems across the restaurant, and there was a lot of R's in there to mess you up. Yeah, that's fun. Thanks a lot, Erica. Okay, so just because I'm from this area, some people may not know what that is, but Yum Brands. What is Yum Brands?
Yeah, so Yum Brands is one of the largest quick service restaurant companies. They are the parent company to Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC, and also a smaller one called Habit Burger. So they essentially are that parent company that really holds everyone, and we build technology to support these larger brands, basically.
I need to pitch them my idea for a new restaurant on the moon. Great food, no atmosphere.
Don't.
Wow. Okay.
Love that.
All right. Since it's Halloween, I'll tell one of my wife's favorite dad joke. It's skeleton walks into a bar and he says, "I'll have a beer and a mop."
It's not landing.
We'll think about the logistics of a skeleton drinking a beer. It's the same reason that a
skeleton didn't cross the road. He's got no guts.
I see.
Oh, yeah, so you think about a skeleton drinking a beer, right? You pour it in and it's all over the floor. He has to mop it up. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
My brain was not in logistics mode. Too early for that. Not enough coffee for that.
All right, of the brands that Yum Brands owns, what's your favorite? Where do you go to get lunch or dinner or whatever out of the options that you have?
So I am I would say a strong Taco Bell person. When I was pregnant, I went to Taco Bell every single day for the last month, and I got a potato griller, which they have now. It's not a thing anymore. But it got to the point where the employees knew my name, and I knew that wasn't maybe the best sign. But I blame it all on the pregnancy.
That's fair.
Yeah, I went to Taco Bell until I looked like I was pregnant.
I mean, let's be honest. The price is amazing. The food is pretty good, and they've really upped their quality. ultimately, and their brand, man, they're doing really well with their branding. I think the Habit Burger, if you've never had it, Californians would probably say they have, but Habit Burger would probably be my next one. But I've only eaten there like 4 times. So
Well, since Yum Brands is from, I live in Northern Kentucky, since they're from Louisville, Kentucky, and the way we say it here is not Louisville or Louisville, it's Louisville. It's like you swallow your tongue. It's Louisville. It's from Louisville. Hopefully they'll bring a Habit Burger to this area, and I'll have to check it out because I don't know when the next time I'll be in California for anything.
it's very good. I really hope they do expand. I think they're on the like trajectory. It's actually surprising when they first bought Habit Burger, everyone was a little confused because it's just a much smaller, comparing it to the large giants of KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. So it was really I was like surprised to even find out that Yum had Habit Burger inside of their suite. But now they have all of the, or not all, they have all the different types, the most common types: burgers, pizzas, and tacos.
Yeah, it's interesting how long it takes for certain restaurants to franchise out into other states. Like it took us forever to get a Chick-fil-A in Michigan. So and it's just even though like it's almost like they start expanding from like their epicenter, like wherever they started, and they just slowly kind of expand. And I'm not quite sure, like for instance you said it's a California thing, like because we're in the Midwest, it feels like it takes forever for it to get this far east.
And there's lots of rules too, like franchising anything. There's a lot of brand, like they want to make sure that it's not just popping up everywhere every 2 seconds. So it's almost like there's lots limited amount of franchisees. So you have to like find the right place, the right people, the right market. Oh, but there's only a certain amount of franchisees available or allowed in whatever state. And it's really interesting. It's actually a fascinating space, the space of franchising restaurants, because I didn't know this. There were so many rules that you have to follow if you franchise with a larger org. And there's just so many rules. Like specifically, I think my husband and I were looking at like Culver's. And they're like, you have to spend at least X% on marketing every month. And I'm like, wow, that's very granular, like operations. So I feel like my understanding of what a franchisee owner is like really changed when I was like looking at it. So it's fascinating. It's hard work though. Oh my gosh, owning a restaurant, man, and being a team member in the restaurant, that is some hard work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have been an employee of, well, they weren't Yum at the time. It was PepsiCo at the time, but they spun out Yum. But yeah, I was an employee. I worked for Pizza Hut, slinging pizzas for many years. So as a younger person, I guess everything I've done in the past is when I was a younger person by definition, but you get what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually
every
did
second
training.
that passes is in the past, right?
Yeah.
I actually worked at Taco Bell twice.
Oh, nice.
And I still love their food. So
good.
That's a testament right there.
You're right.
A testament. I've never worked officially, but I have done training. What's cool about Yum is they make you do training. So you'll go in store and you'll train with all the brands. And it was honestly, I think, really, really fun and really eye-opening. But it's really cool that they like force you. It's like you need to go empathize with the people that you're building products for. And good. Training is the best way. I think it's a really eye-opening experience too. I've never worked in I was a waitress. That was my closest to food. But it was really fun working the drive-thru. If I did that, man, that's where I would live, is live in the drive-thru.
So you've mentioned that you've had some involvement with in-store systems for different of the different brands. Is that part of your role as developing products for in store and they're on like what all is the scope and the breadth of what you do for
Mhm.
Yum Brands?
So I do a lot, I would say. I have been moving around in many different teams where I was first actually on our menu management team, which essentially is the person that I was designing for is a data manager. So the person who is the one who's inputting and managing all the complexities of national menus and even store customizations. Because, fun fact, stores can do almost anything that they want up to a certain point, and they can even price anything to what they want. So, like, the data manager's job is to like manage thousands and thousands of stores basically and all the requests that franchisees have. So like that was like the first team that I was that I was on, and then I went over to the point of sale team, where I got to do a lot more like KFC US, Taco Bell US experience design, which was really awesome. My eyes opened into what we call service design, which essentially is how like the environment that the users inside of the store impacts their experience so intensely. And it's fascinating because you can actually make an improvement by like changing the placement of your store or changing the placement even of a button, and that could actually encourage or discourage like forgetfulness, which is quite fun. So I did that for a little while, and now I'm actually back over in the data management system. We call that admin portal, and I'm also very close with a project called Tracks, which essentially is the inventory and labor management. And then we have teams for what we call the super app, which is more of like the day-to-day operations. Everyone has an app, and they can like post and get routines. And it kind of walks them through, handholds the team members through operating the store efficiently and effectively. So I really touch, I would say, everything in some way. And it's also a logistical fun thing to try to like bring everyone together, just because it's just inherently challenging. Like we have people all over the world. Yum is really cool because I think most everyone is remote, specifically in the technology space. We're all over. Like we've got people in Vietnam, the UK, and I actually even work with the consumer-facing brands. So that's going to be the .com. So KFC.com, TacoBell.com, like the apps. Like I know the teams, and we're slowly building out a centralized user experience model where we could like more effectively speak to each other and understand what everyone's working on, so then we can be influenced and hopefully create experiences that are similar. So a team member, whether you're a team member or someone above office, you feel like you're working on a product, a Yum product, kind of like Adobe. Like Adobe is a single brand and they've got lots of different apps. I think that's kind of like the direction that we're trying to head in, especially because 4 brands, they're very different, tacos, pizzas, chickens, but there is a lot of overlap. And so there is efficiencies, I think, that we can build. And that was kind of an aside. So yeah, I touch everything, I would say. Mostly.
So you could say you've touched all of our food.
I have touched all of the food with my little grubby fingers.
So what was
maybe not so finger looking good anymore?
Not so finger looking
good. So what was it like, the conversation of trying to convince folks that I mean, because we face the same thing in just software development, right? But from a product and experience standpoint, trying to convince people about that overlap. You mentioned there's overlap, but everybody thinks they're the snowflake. Like, oh, no, our brand's unique, our customers are unique, our experience is unique. There's nothing that pizza has to do with tacos. There's nothing in common. How were those conversations? Did you get a lot of pushback? Did you get a lot of like, oh yeah, I can see that? Well, how did that go?
Good question. Lots of pushback, still pushback, to be honest. Okay. And I just want to say, like, yes, there are snowflakes in their own right. Technically, even in the data model, like the pizza and chicken and tacos, they all use similar terminology, but they are different. And so I think that difference is what makes each brand special. And our intent is not to wipe that away. I still think Taco Bell has a kick butt branding, and they've got a really specific audience that they're gearing toward. And so they can do more fun, like crazy experimental things because it makes sense for that market. It makes sense for that space. And the rules might change inside of pizza and chicken. And so I'm not invalidating that, I would say, but I think that 10% of customization is what really makes a brand stand out. It's what makes them successful. And so communicating that piece, if it's like, hey, I'm not here to wipe away what you have already created. I just want to take the things that are overlapping and I just want to optimize them. Like, let's share the knowledge. We all have stores, we all have drive-throughs. That's all similar language. Where are their optimizations? Taco Bell is doing it really well for this instance. KFC is doing it really well for this instance. Can we learn from each other? It's more of a group effort. And I think that was inherently really painful at first, because of course it is. I think any white label solution where you were working with many brands, there's going to be this fear of like, oh, well, they're just going to make me a generic brand. And I don't think that's the intent. And it should never be, that should never be the case. I think it's up to us as people prescribing the experiences to make strong correlations to what is shared, but also make very strong like customization recommendations. So what makes a brand? What makes them special? How do we keep that? And I think changing the tone, making the brands feel like we're not trying to become Yum. Like, we're not going to make KFC rebrand to Yum. Like, we want them to be special. Like, they've been doing it for a long time. They're doing really well. Like, we want to keep that. So it's once you start changing your tune and you empathize with the people that you're trying to work with, the conversation becomes a lot easier. And also, it's really important to set expectations with those types of conversations and goals too, because the moment that a brand feels like you're not, like your motivations don't align with theirs, that they're going to feel threatened. And that is that's a really challenging thing. The first time it happens, it's really hard to get out of it. So you have to like put in the work. You have to be like talking to the brand, talking to the people that you've lost the trust with, and you have to dive in to like what is motivating them and how do you pair it back to them so that they feel like they're being heard. Because ultimately, we all have the same motivations. It's just our delivery could vary. And that's even harder for a larger organization because we are not just speaking to one person. We're 1,000 people speaking to 1,000 other people. So that word of mouth is very challenging. And honestly, I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think that there'll always be that challenge. And I think that's true for anything that's white labeled. When I was at Bread Financial or Alliance Data at the time, it was the same thing. They didn't want an experience or a product that was generic. That was long-winded. Sorry.
Well, and you have a lot of tradition with these companies too, right? Because they're not like new kids on the block, like as far as, and I don't mean the boy band, but these brands have been around for quite some time. Like I remember as a kid, all of them being around, and still, so they're at least 50-year-old brands. Not that I'm 50. Well, yeah, wait, I am. But
I was gonna say so.
but so you've got a lot of tradition there in breaking down those traditional barriers has got to be an issue too, right?
Yeah, it's huge. And like there are franchisees who have contracts written with the Colonel, like KFC, with the Colonel himself, his signature on a napkin. Like that's still a valid contract. So I think it is a challenge. And Yum, we are much newer. We are young. Like, we are technically the parent company, but in reality, like, we are learning from them. And I think when we put that hat on of like KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, like, you are the experts. Like, let's work together. Teach me all the things, and I'm going to be the bridge between all of the brands. And I'm going to try to spot these efficiencies that other brands are doing. And we're going to just see if we can't work together to do that. So it's inherently a very challenging relationship, but I think it's a very worthwhile endeavor to work through that.
I'll give you a freebie. You get them to have a collab product that's a chicken taco pizza that all three of them carry.
So that's so funny because that like literally comes up a lot.
I bet. It's like, that would be amazing, and I could get it at any one of the restaurants.
Oh my gosh!
And it's all trademarked. They have to get the chicken from KFC, and they get the taco stuff from Taco Bell, and then they get the pizza stuff from Pizza Hut. And it's like, and they're all working together, feeling each other's pain.
We do have co-branded items, but I really wish we could like build bundles for those co-branded stores to be like, would you like a bucket with your pizza, or a double taco with your with your chicken sandwich?
That would be a great thing for families like mine. Like, I have twin boys, and I call them yin and yang because they are so polar opposite of each other. So one likes Taco Bell, the other one likes pizza. So it's like, well, what do you want? Well, I want pizza. Well, I want tacos. And it's like, and we're kind of stuck in the middle. It's like, maybe I want chicken. So it's like kind of one of those things where it's like, if you could do all of that from a one pickup thing, maybe like, that would be amazing, because then you don't have to run to 3 different restaurants to please 3 different appetites.
Mm-hmm. That would be really awesome for the customer, and I'm just like imagining all of the logistical problems that would.
Oh my gosh, so many logistical problems.
It would be one heck of a store, though. My gosh, to have all of them in one. It would
be like a food court.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Food court in a box.
You'd have the Yum food court.
Yes, the Yum food court. Maybe that's the future.
I must say, I love the Taco Bell, like the co-branding stuff they do with like Doritos, with the Flaming Hot, with the now they got what is this, the Cheez-It thing? I haven't tried the Cheez-It thing yet, but this like monster Cheez-It. Like, how do I get a box of those? Like, I want to eat just the Cheez-It itself.
Yeah, I'm constantly impressed with what Taco Bell, and honestly, like their tests, the innovation kitchens are like, that's so cool. Like, that's just so fascinating, and I love listening to just like the things that they're creating, and I'm like, wow, they put so much energy into that, which I think is amazing, because that newness, I think, really keeps the brands relevant.
Well, what is it like to support you worked on point of sale systems, so I would imagine a menu like Taco Bell, I don't think Pizza Hut and KFC probably don't, and maybe a little bit more. That I would guess that Pizza Hut is probably the most static menu, and then KFC might be second, but Taco Bell's got to be just a hot mess to try to keep up with from a point of sale system standpoint. Is that true?
So it's funny. I think they almost all are equal in my eyes, just because they all have different, it just depends on the problem, right? So Taco Bell has a lot of customizations. Like, they're generally like their most used thing is like, I'm going to swap out ground beef for beans. Like, that's like pretty popular. So like, that's very
minus meat plus bean. Yep.
Yeah,
from my old register days, I remember hitting that a lot.
Minus
meat, plus bean.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, but then but then you have KFC, which is like bucket, and most likely they're going to be changing chicken types and chicken flavors. And then for pizza, you're going to have the complexity of a half and half pizza where you have, and also like the weights of it. So to me, it's like everyone has complex modifications. You just might have more weight on, it's either it's ingredient swapping, it's flavor swapping, it's side changing. It's like they're all kind of like modifications in my brain, but they all kind of have just their complexities in their own right, which makes it challenging because if you're creating a singular point of sale system, you have to account for the extremes in all spaces, because that's like one of the big things that we've been trying to do is create a point of sale that both Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC can use. So we're white labeling it. And it's fascinating. It's a really fun problem because we want it to feel like the brands, because obviously the team member is working for that brand. So we want to make sure that we're flexible for that. We want to make sure that the modifications are flexible, just because each brand is going to have different needs. And it's kind of an interesting challenge because we have to weigh these requests constantly. It's like, okay, is this a KFC ask or is this a entire everyone ask? Because that's going to change greatly how fast or what methods we use to update it. Because there is this push and pull of like customization that we want to keep, but we don't want it to be too complex. So yeah, it's just like a balance. But I would say that for me, it's like all of them have their very specific needs. So you're going to run into similar pain points, but they're going to be in different subjects and different parts of the point of sale, if you will.
So on the point of sale screen, where is your your prime location? Because you talked about being able to find things easily earlier, and I know that when I was a cashier at Taco Bell, that one of the things, there was always that one modification that was like, how do I do that again? And it was like, oh, you got to press this, then this, then this, and then that. And I'm like, why isn't that just a button like the other ones, right? So how do you like define your prime real estate for these different brands? Because obviously, like you said, there's different feels overall. You've got kind of your build your own, your customize what's there, and then um, you know this is how I want it assembled type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's a big challenge, real estate in general. And honestly, it's fascinating because so you might say, like, okay, this happens 6 times a day for me, or maybe like 40 times in a shift. And so that is like fodder or weight that can be put into like a business case to say, hey, this is going to have a big impact. But the thing is, you also have to think about location, because the location of your Taco Bell in California versus like little small town in Ohio, you're going to have different prices, demographics, the customers are going to have different motivations. So like some markets or some parts of the country or even just cities, it can change like from one city to the next. It's like the customers might be more worried about how expensive it's going to be. So the customer is going to ask the team member, how can I make this cheaper? Like, is there a combo that I can get? But that may be not the case for that same exact brand in California and San Francisco Bay Area, because they are probably going to be in a different economical situation, and their motivations and their requests aren't going to be driven by like, how can I bundle this in a way that's going to give me the best deal? It might be more like, just make all the customizations for me. So it's a really interesting problem because we get these requests and unfortunately we have to like weigh them across the country, across the economics of these particular areas, because what is common for you might be not common for another market. And so we have to then come in and be like, okay, well, how do we support both parties, because we have to think about the most complex and we have to think about like the least resistant. And so we do a lot of analysis and discovery and as much research as we possibly can get on like where the request is coming from. This is why it's so important to understand the environmental factors. A lot of people don't think about, oh, creating an experience on the point of sale is going to be the same across the country. It's like, no, it's going to change. It's going to be very different. And so there is this like balance of like, do we create it for everyone or do we make it a customization? And then these different markets can actually take advantage of that. But then you also have additional problems that might arise with that, like the findability of that particular feature and whether or not it's turned on, that customization. So there's all these like, I guess these like weights that you have to think about. And it's a really, really hard challenge to decide what gets prioritized. And this is why research is so important, because without it, we're guessing. Even if we talk to like we can't just talk to like one market. We can't just talk to the people in Columbus, Ohio and expect the experience to be the same. And so that scale is always a challenge. And I totally forget the question that you had asked before. I totally want to.
Well, I think, yeah, you hit on something that was very interesting to me. Because my example in my brain was like, I'm guessing Boulder, Colorado, you're going to see that minus meat plus bean more often than you would in South Texas, for instance, or something like that. So do you, if there is a prime real estate spot for the more common things, do you put the minus bean or minus meat plus bean button in that spot in Boulder, but you don't do that in South Texas? I don't know. And I can imagine you can't like use statistics to measure and then evolve the menu and move things around accordingly. Because most of these, if I remember when I was on the cash register, you're just listening and like, I'm just,
Yes,
I'm
muscle
on
memory.
autopilot, right? So if
Yeah.
you move things around, you're going to mess me up and
Exactly.
make me slower. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's another fun thing. Muscle memory is a constant thing that we are not fighting. We're trying to work with. We're trying to play around and like almost, it's so fun because like the mental model of a human, it's invisible, but it's really cool about like UIs in general and then UX. You can change a user's mental model, and it's fascinating what the experience can do to the person using it. Like I could change someone's behavior by like moving a button. I can make it more likely to, or make people less likely to forget about sauces by moving the sauces button in a area that they're going to have a lot more like eyesight into. So it's just really fascinating what we as designers, like I always say, like we have so much power because visuals are so important to most of our not everyone's, but to like most of our experiences. And I think that is terrifying because you could like potentially hurt a store if you move a button. It's like, oh, they lost $4 million today because this button moved and they had to retrain on where this went. So the impact is insane. So we have to do a lot of research and a lot of talking to people to make sure that we're de-risking a prescription or a solution, which is inherently challenging.
Yeah, I remember some user tests that I was sitting in on, and just in we framed our questions in a way that we were monitoring their screen at the time, and so we basically we were asking them to perform a task. So like, how would you submit this answer type of thing, and to watch them move their mouse to the button and never click it and then move the cursor off of it and then go back to it and then and back and forth. It's like there's so much learning in just seeing that, and they never said a word, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're they're right over the button and they don't realize that's what they have to hit. I'm like, come on,
It's
just
like being a parent. Like
click
you
the
just want to.
button.
Yeah, you're like this is a learning moment. I can't interrupt. I can't. I cannot interfere with their with this like with what's happening. It's like being a parent. It's like I want to push the pedals for my child because he's having such a hard time like pushing the pedals, but I know it's a pain. That's a huge pain. But usability testing and just like observation in general, especially when you're so familiar. Like you work for months, weeks, hours just like working on a design with all these hypotheses and assumptions and then watching them do it and you're like you're so close. But it's great because that just tells me it's like they're not confident right now. So how can I make them more confident? What affordances or visual feedback can I give them to make them feel confident? Like the mental model is there. Like I'm aligned because the first thing they did was hover over this button. But what's missing for them? And that, I feel like a detective. Like I am just constantly being like, tell me your inner thoughts that you yourself don't even know. Because they don't know. People are so reactive and there's so much processing power happening in the background. And it's up to us to like ask questions that will at least get us closer to an answer that is going to make them more successful. And that's what I love about user experience and just products in general. It's like, it's always learning. You're always learning. You can be doing something for 100 years and because the environment and culture changes, job security.
Well, I have a couple of questions I want to make sure I ask because it's just interesting to me. One would be, so Aaron talked about user testing in the age of the mouse and the web, but I would guess, just based on being, ordering tacos a lot, I would guess that the user interface that they're dealing with is not mouse and cursor, it's touchscreen. So how do you like figure out like what are these people doing? Because they don't interact until they look at something, think about something, and then they touch. They don't like move their finger around. They touch exactly what they want to touch. How do you observe that in a scientific way? What does that look like when you're doing testing?
Good question. So that has inherently always been a bit challenging. I think with the newer technologies, you can like experience that hovering a bit. I know that like Apple Pencil has that. You can like be close to the screen and it kind of acts like a hover, but honestly that's not like the case for like most most devices. And so I would say the solution to that problem is physically observing the user in the environment. So you're watching where, and actually what I do is I have the screen recording and then I have a camera behind them, watching where their fingers move, because they do tend to do this like follow, like looking around. Not always, not in that also depends on the person. So not everyone is going to have, they're going to be looking more, they're going to visually scan rather than having like a finger actually do it, for many reasons too. And so that inherently is quite challenging. When I'm doing usability testings, when it's not an observation. So when an observation, you just have to like take what is happening at face value and you can't like interfere because you're trying to understand what are the experiences, like what are they doing? Where is their finger going? Are they leaning on their desk? Are they leaning on the screen? What's the placement? Like what's the environmental impacts? Like are they writing things down? Some people do that. Like they'll have a sticky note and they'll write it down because they know that they need to do it, but they don't want to forget it. And they know they have to do this complex task. They're trying to remind themselves. So there's all these environmental factors that absolutely cannot be observed without being in person, which makes it a very expensive endeavor because you have to like travel and get people out there and potentially have a disruption in the restaurant. It is not natural to have usability testers or like just user experience designers like inside of a restaurant. Like you're going to have some type of negative disruption. But yeah, that's like a constant challenge. You have to physically be there. You can also make some assumptions on hypotheses based on user patterns and user flows. So if you're not in the store and you're just like looking at session replays, then you can analyze the steps that they took versus like the end goal. So if you were to say, hey, this person ordered a 16-piece bucket with a side of fries and a Coke, you can say, hey, this was the end goal, and this is how many flows it took to get them there. And from there, you can start inferring, and then you can start digging, maybe doing some usability testing, maybe doing some user interviews, maybe doing some user observation to get down to like the core problem. I feel like oftentimes solutions and user experience in general, like the core problem is not usually addressed with like most solutions. And that is inherently very challenging to get down to. And you really need a research expert to like do that effectively, because if not, you risk asking a biased question and making the user feel like they need to answer in a certain way, or making them feel uncomfortable because someone from corporate is here and they're watching everything I do, which is uncomfortable, and it's going to make them act in a different way. And it's up to the person facilitating that conversation or that experience to put them at ease, to not ask biased questions, to make them feel like it's a safe space to like make mistakes, and empower them to like talk to us, which is quite challenging, especially if you think about the team member. Maybe they're younger in their professional lives, and so that speaking aloud, speaking to someone higher up, there might be a lot of barriers in their the mental barriers in their mind of like, oh, I have to be perfect so I don't get fired. But I'm like, in reality, I don't have the power to do that. Like, you're better than what I can do, so you're the expert user. Teach me your ways. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite a challenge, I would say.
You get a lot of that observer effect, right?
The
It's
Schrodinger's
like
cat.
just the act of observing changes the behavior. It's like, you know, you're doing things that you normally wouldn't do.
And there are things you can do to combat that.
Kind of like harder. Asking biased questions, right? It's
that is so hard. That is, and honestly, I even still deal with that as a problem for me. And I love ChatGPT because I'm just like, can you tell me what's wrong with this question and tell me what's biased about this question and help me create a unbiased question? And I love doing that. But honestly, it can be challenging. Well, because if you have a question that's going off script and you're in the store, you're in the restaurant, and you're like, okay, how do I ask this in an unbiased question? Like off the cuff. Like you're just like saying the question 4 different ways inside of your brain. And the user or the person you're observing is just like standing there waiting for you to ask the question. And I'm like, I promise I'll get there. I just have to ask this in a way that's not going to put my biases that I have into the question. And it can be quite challenging to do that for sure.
Well, in allowing them to have the space by not asking too many questions too, because the more questions you ask, the more likely you're adding a bias. Because if you say something like, how would you save this? Okay, well, you're telling them to save it, right? So it's not really biased. Now they're looking for a save function. And if you've named it save, you've just clued them into exactly where they need to go. And that used to make I'd be sitting in the back of the room going, that's not a good question.
No.
Throw that one out.
Yeah, basically.
But that was the part of UX testing that I loved was you know, just hearing. It was almost like I was watching 2 different shows. It was like screen and screen type of thing. I've got the user screen over here and the UX tester over here, and and I was seeing mistakes on both sides. It was kind of like great. It's like, bad question. Oh, they can't find it. Oh, you are failing hard.
Yes. And also, like, when you were talking about, like, oh, I just want to do it for them, that's another hard thing, too. Like, when a test has failed, the user has not failed. That's very important because the user is always correct. It's the prototype or the design that has failed. And if that happens and they're looking at you like, what do I do?
Well, wait, let's be honest. There are some users that just fail. Like you have 10 good tests, and then
I
you got
designed
the
this
one
perfectly.
guy that can't spell ABC.
No, you're just experiencing a diverse perspective.
Look at that.
Wow.
I'm very passionate about this. There is no possible failure. It's usually, I mean, there could be environmental failures too. Like that could be a potential thing that's happening. Like, I don't know, the prototype froze. That's a possibility.
Oh, that
but
never
I feel
happens.
like in general, like, because that's just, it's a good perspective. And also, tests aren't supposed to be 100%, right? There's always going to be varying. If there is a test that's like 100% correct, like 13 out of 13 users have successfully tested this, I'm immediately red flagged. I'm like, there was an error in some type of conducting, or there was a bias question, and maybe this is just me being, because I feel like UX is all about overanalyzing everything. Because our biggest superpower is de-risking experiences. And if something comes back at 100%, I'm like, did we ask it in the right way? Did we allow enough openness for high-level conversation? Like, what other things did we miss that could potentially add a bit of color to the situation? And I mean, there have been times where I've gotten like 100% success rate, and I'll give it a good hard look. And if you can't find it, you can't find it. That's fine. And you can go ahead and ship it. But I would never, ever say to like a brand that I am 100% confident that this is going to work and this is going to be effective because of the 5 users usability testing that I did. There's always going to be some risk. And I just wish people wouldn't be so perfectionist about it.
Well, and that's the thing. And 100% doesn't happen in nature. Right. That's why there are bell curves. That's why there's, normal distributions. It's why, in anything you do, it's not going to be 100%. And and we combat this all the time with, test coverage. Somebody learns about test coverage, like we have to be covered at 100%. And it's like, no, that's not. Yeah, I know. I've heard you say it, James. I was thinking of you when I started
I
this.
know you're talking about me. You say that. You do
This
need to
has
be
to
at
be
100%
tested at
test coverage.
100%. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't,
No.
because there are always those things where the test is going to cost you more than it did to create the code in the first place, and you lose the benefit, or it's going to be so intricate that it's going to be difficult to maintain. So it's not worth that extra. Yeah, it makes it brittle.
That's a huge value, like, thing that you have to really take into consideration. Like, I would probably never test a settings feature to like update a profile picture. Like, that is not affecting my bottom line. And so I think it's really important to research. Don't research everything, every single aspect of your design, because like you said, it might be more expensive than to just go and like build it. And at that point, you might as well just like build it and then test it, because just like skip the design process and go into it. But like, if it's not going to have a major impact on your overarching like objective, then it probably doesn't need to be tested. Or I think it adds complexity, it adds like money, and I think it's really important for researchers and product folks to understand when and where it's actually good to do like appropriate testing. Like, Yum isn't sending us out to Taco Bell's in California every quarter. Like, that's a once a year type thing where we do a big chunk of testing. And I think that's just a good example of research done in an appropriate way, where if you have something small like, oh, changing a product or changing a profile picture, maybe add that into one of your larger scale usability testing, like modifying a chicken bucket, which literally is seconds equivalent to dollars, because every second it takes to modify something and doing it incorrectly is like a cost. And you can quantify that. And so that's a really awesome like superpower to have, to be like, hey, we can save X% of, or not like confidently, we're 70% sure that we can save X% of time on a particular complex order that we think will add value. And I think that's a hard thing for product UX designers, developers. It's really difficult and challenging to like remember that. And you don't really need to have a test for everything, but you do need to test appropriately where it makes sense. How is it going to impact? If I don't do this, how expensive? Like if maybe like how much is the risk going to be? Like, oh, this feature isn't good. How much is that going to cost me if that's the case? And if you can make a business case, then I think it's fine. It's sales. Like UX is basically selling an idea, and then it's up to the business to like advocate for themselves and be like, okay, but you want to spend X amount of dollars. How much money is this going to give me back? What's the ROI? The return
the
on
juice has to be worth the squeeze, kind of thing,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. With that, I kind of leverage that 80-20 rule, right? You want to make sure you're focusing on that 80% of the use, right, type of thing, instead of that 20% that's hardly ever going to get used.
Yeah, there's a level of complexity too, even with that though. Like, let's say you go and propose a new solution. There is this like time in which it takes a user to learn something, and then it's almost like you can't like measure the value right when a feature goes out. So you have to like give it a little while to let people like start to learn it. I am constantly impressed by how adaptable people are to learning complex experiences. Like data management is insane. Like the amount of variations of a bucket of one singular piece is insane, like astronomical. And they're going in managing hundreds and hundreds of lines of menu items, of menu variations, of menu types. And that has always impressed me. I'm like, people can do anything if you give them enough time to learn. And I think a lot of people forget that. There's a balance, because you don't want to spend too much time on training, because that can be costly.
Yeah. Well, I must say, I am just deeply disappointed in your answer to how you test touch-based interface. Here, in my mind, what I had, like, my mind immediately went to, like, there's that helicopter that, like, it can observe the pilot's eyes and shoot at the thing that it's looking at. I'm like, you guys have to have these systems, like a camera-based systems that monitors my eyes and knows what I'm looking at on the screen. And
I think that does exist.
I'm sure it does in somewhere, but that's what I was imagining. Like you had that, because I mean, if we can do that, and I think they have them built into cars now, like to see like how alert are you. They're monitoring your face, and
you get a warning if you close your eyes. It'll beep at you to wake you up. Yep.
Yeah, I think my wife's Kia has that. Yeah. I think you have an alertness thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
They can do that, like if you're on a phone. Like, so a good context too. Touch devices in the point of sale, we are on very specific devices. Like they are built for point of sale, and it's built on an Android system, and it's for that. But like your phone, like if I were to build a consumer facing iOS or Android app, you actually might have the ability to tap into those technologies simply by purchasing a product analytics tool, because the cameras now have LiDAR, and they could like see you, which there is like this question of whether or not it should, I think is another an ethical debate that could probably be talked about forever. But I think that is the case. Like we have heat maps too, and you have heat maps on mobile devices, and it's either going to be like how often things are pressed. You could like create those experiences, basically is what I'm saying. And I'm pretty sure they exist depending on the device that you're using, but not everyone is going to have that device. not everyone's gonna have the newest iPhone.
So we used to have the analog metrics that we would capture. It was how worn out the button was that you pressed the most.
Yeah.
It's like you couldn't read, meat anymore on that button because it was pressed so many times, or cheese.
I feel like that's kind of the case sometimes with
Right? That's where the big grease spot is on the
that's
glass,
the
right?
grease
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Like 1,000%. I think that's totally still a thing.
We had one of our consultants at Calibrity they needed a new laptop because their keyboard was failing on their laptop that we had issued them, and I was like, okay, well, tell me a little bit about what's going on. And so he sends me this picture of his keyboard, and the A, S, D, and W keys were all worn off. There was a bone, like a worn off spot in the middle of his keyboard, and the arrow keys on the right side were all worn off. I'm like, that's not coding, dude. Come on. At least buy an external keyboard. If you're going to be playing games with your machine, I don't care. I don't need to know that. But come on. We're out your keyboard obvious. Playing video games. Come on. So you brought up an interesting thing earlier. You were talking about the meat button or whatever. So of course, my mind always goes to movies. I think of the movie Idiocracy. Have you guys seen Idiocracy? So when they're at the doctor in 500 years in the future, the guy's standing there and is like, okay, I have a headache, and you point to a button where it's like head, it's like a graphical thing, like it's a picture of somebody's head. Do you, and this is not to say that the people working at registers need to be dumbed down to, but is it faster to provide pictures of things on the menu, or do you use words, or do you use pictures? What makes it actually faster to help those people at the register?
This is a very passionate subject of mine.
I love it.
Yes, this is, I would say, and this also actually brings in the accessibility of it all too.
Yeah.
So if you think about the team member, these are people that have varying levels of professional experience. They might be really young. They might have different levels of education. They might speak a different language. Because the country is quite large, and there could be whole communities. And I was even at a store that 90% of the time everyone was speaking in Spanish, and they were like, "Oh, it'd be really great if I had a Spanish option," but we didn't necessarily have it at the time. So that, I would say, is a inclusive design experience. So there is a lot of research, I would say, that says visuals, you're going to be able to scan a lot quicker and be more effective if you can use visuals to get places quicker, basically. But there is this inherent risk of getting to the place that you need to go, but before you tap it, you have to feel confident in that decision. And so in general, we have larger images on our tiles of the menu items, but we always incorporate the text with it. So we have that additional affordance. So I'm a big proponent my biggest thing, I think anything that is tappable must have 2 to 3 affordances or visual cues to let a user know you are selecting on the appropriate button. And so having a combination of image and text supports both parties. It supports people who maybe they are readers. That is just their learning style. They're really quickly at scanning, and they can jump between words fairly quickly. But maybe someone is in a very loud environment like the team member is, and reading, because we all know that if you're experiencing a loud noise, this is why when you're doing a serious parallel park, you're going to turn down the music so you can focus, right? Even though your eyes are the things doing the work, but in reality, your whole brain, your whole body is doing the work. And so by supporting quick navigation or quick scannability using images, and also having the text with it, usually in a bit smaller of an area, that kind of gives you best of both worlds. So as someone gets really good at the point of sale, they're going to just be trained to look at the images, and they might notice really minute details in every image. And that's really great. But the thing is, though, marketing images and just food images, like how do you tell the difference between an extra crispy leg and an original recipe leg? That is a very slight color change. The whole shape is completely the same, but the color changes. And what if there's a big bright light like shining in from the drive-through onto the screen, and now you don't have enough saturation to see that all you see is like 2 chicken legs, and you're like, I have no idea which one is which. Because you're thinking about it like you're going really, really fast because you're incentivized to make orders and make customizations as fast as possible, and also not make a mistake. So if you just had images, now you're like setting up the user up for failure or potential failure. But having those letters will be like, okay, I found the legs, fast, speed, but I'm going to verify that I select the correct one using the words. Now, if you're someone who mostly speaks Spanish, and that's going to be like your primary language, what you can do is you can be trained on the image and visual cues, and then start learning those English words and start trying to like spot the pieces that are like, okay, this is the unique ones. This is what makes sense to me. Hopefully, though, we'll get to a place where we can actually have multilingual, which we do have multilingual for like data management and things like that. So eventually that's going to have to be the case. But in the meantime, if maybe they're new and they can speak really good English, but reading isn't the best thing, we can still like support them. So it's all about like understanding the different experiences and how do we combine both of them to create an experience that's going to allow the user to be successful with the objectives that we have in mind.
Yeah, that language barrier has always been something that it's a bit of an annoyance for me, and not in like that severe right wing kind of view, but but more of, so one if you think about somebody that speaks multiple languages, they're multilingual. If you somebody that speaks 2 languages, they're bilingual. Somebody who speaks 1 language, American, right? So that one of those things that's always irritated me is that there's, you know, the the thought of adding additional languages is always kind of an afterthought that's brought into a product after it's already been launched, after it's been out there and used several times, instead of on the forefront of accessibility. And I think that's to me that seems very narrow scope, and it's also much more expensive to do, because I've done some translation projects in order to make them multilingual, and doing that at the end is so much more expensive because you have to redesign the UIs and put in those placeholders and take out those places where you've used a literal string for what the value is on a button or in a text, and extract those out so they can be internationalized, localized, and um, it's so much more expensive than if you just would have started with it that way.
Yes. You have to define your intentions. Yum, I think we've always known that, like, we understand the behaviors. KFC and Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, they've been here for a while. So what's great about Yum is that we have that like knowledge. And so we are thinking about it. Like, even if we're not necessarily implementing like right away, having bilingual flipping between each one, we know it's coming. And that's a superpower because we could then build things in a way that's like, okay, how is this going to work for left to right languages? How is this going to work in this culture? How is this going to work in whatever it might be? And those are questions that I think we're always asking ourselves. And it's something really challenging to get right, because we have to do our research in appropriate ways that allows us to be as diverse as possible, because we are a giant global company. So luckily we have that ability, and we can do some proactiveness. And now with like new AI models, it's like, why would you not have multilingual at the beginning with its like the ChatGPT's translations are amazing. I mean, there's still 1000% going to be issues, and you might have to change a few things because German words are a bit longer than US, or not US, oh my gosh, English words. And there's going to be more characters. So how do you create a pattern that is flexible enough, but also every time you add that complexity, it could potentially take a bit longer to, like, a button could maybe take months. If you're like, this has to be multilingual, it has to support at least 60 characters, it has to have an icon of this size. What if the icon doesn't show up? And so you're essentially going through all of these situations and these scenarios to actively make a really good customizable button to be flexible. And that is challenging work, and that's expensive work, to be honest, because it's a lot of upfront thinking. But I think it's less expensive than than like you said, doing all of the English language and then retrofitting it, not having a strategy in place, because now you're essentially trying to build a strategy, and you're working within constraints that you might not have had if you just had built it at the beginning. But the question is, like, what do you focus on? And that is going to vary depending on the product.
Well, I think too that there's going to be something we've seen in other areas of programming is we see patterns emerge, and you grow accustomed to these. And these are, instead of thinking about certain things over and over again, they emerge as patterns. And once that pattern's established, they become standardized and then simplified. So if you think about where UIs were even 10 years ago, they were it was a much different playing field than what you've got today, with the responsive design in these flex spaces that are adjusting themselves based on the form factor that you're on, and that kind of thing. It's amazing to be able to just put a button here and have it size and color and text and all that automatically, when you know 10 years ago we were having to code all of those different things.
Static. Like, it was all static. I remember
Oh yeah.
coding my first website in TextEdit and making my body 800 pixels wide because like that. And when I got to college, and that wasn't when responsiveness came in, and my whole brain just blew up, because I'm like, what percentage? And then Flexbox came out, and then I'm just like, man, this is amazing. And now, like, I feel like with ChatGPT and even like Figma, the design programs that I use, they're starting to like implement these practices that are very similar to Flexbox and similar to these responsive behaviors. And that is just so cool. It's so cool because we have so much power. And I feel like there's so many cool things that you can do, but it's like, how do you think of everything? The answer is you can't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. So, of course, if you're doing a technology podcast right now, you have to mention AI in every episode. So, how do you think, or what do you see? Because I know there's areas of, what did you say? Quick, whatever, QRS, quick service restaurant, these areas where they're experimenting with like just like the drive-through is a perfect case. Like, so you could just pull up to the drive-through and say, I want a bucket of chicken, or blah 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 blah, and it's kind of just piecing together your order automatically by listening to you. Where the systems are getting much more sophisticated of listening to, voice input or just typing, whatever you want and understanding what you're talking about. How is that changing interface design? Are we going to have, just speaking in English to the computer and it'll just do what we want, that rather than navigating through a bunch of buttons? Like, how is that changing your world?
Yeah, I feel like it's a huge change, I think, in just technology and general. And I probably have an over positive view. I always tell this, like I always say, like, if you are afraid of AI, don't come talk to me. But the thing is, like, I'm biased because AI helps me in every way possible. On one hand, it helps me be a better designer, it helps me be a better facilitator, it helps me create more professional, like, just communication methods. I can create PRDs, I can have it, like, it does so much for me, so I get so much benefit, and that way I can, like, take a step back and be strategic about all of these options instead of relying on, like, all right, well, I have to go through these, like, X amount of user flows so I can really try to test and see if this is going well or not. So yeah, in general, I would say AI has a big impact just on in general. And I feel like it's UI at the moment. I don't think it'll ever get to a point where you're only speaking in voice to a technology, because I feel like we've already tried that with, like, Google and Alexa, the Google Home, and the Siri. I'm on a Mac, so it'll it'll start talking if I do that. But,
and
like,
all of our phones will be like,
yeah,
what?
everyone's gonna wake up. So I feel like there is always going to be some, because most people, not everyone. I wouldn't even say most people. I would say, because majority, it sounds like a negative connotation. A lot of folks have, like, we rely visually on, like, our surroundings to inform our behaviors. So on one hand, I do believe the future of AI and user experience is going to be a more effective way to work with technology. Because I look at AI as this accessibility innovation. Because for me, like, I'm ADHD, I'm dyslexic. So it has upped my communication game. And now I have more respect in my field, because I don't have to worry as much about, like, all right, I can let my brain accidentally change all the letters and I can let my crazy thought process go in whatever direction, because at the end of the day, ChatGPT is going to be my editor, and it's going to, like, distill everything down into the main points, and I'll correct it along the way, of course. So from an accessibility standpoint, it's helped me quite a lot just working within any technology. I feel like it's been so helpful communication wise. Inside of Figma, I can, like, name my layers appropriately, naming design system elements and components. Like, I was even building out, like, a class system in like, Webflow, and that was really helpful to, like, ask and converse with ChatGPT to be like, can you tell me, like, what makes a class effective? What makes it variable? Tell me the properties that, or what are, like, the base things that I should know about. And then I can say, like, tell me what are some recommendations? How would you name this particular class of elements? These are my intentions. This is all of that. So I feel like, on one hand, it's going to empower a lot more people to be more technical, which is amazing in my mind. But I think there's always going to be some type of UI, even with, like, glasses and stuff. Like, they're going to have some type of visual cue, and maybe, like, it's more generative UI, which is a fascinating concept. But to the point we were talking about earlier with muscle memory, I don't know if AI will be able to effectively know when to change something versus not changing something. We could probably train it to do it, but, like, there's always going to be this risk. So from a UI perspective, I think it's just going to make humans interacting with technology more empowered. And it's also going to train us to be, as humans, to better communicate our intentions. That's already, ChatGPT has already helped me with that. Like, I feel like I can way better articulate the things that I want out of an experience because I had to train my GPT to have the appropriate context to be able to be effective in like just communication in general. It's actually I think of ChatGPT kind of like consulting, because consulting, you really have to dig deep on what a brand or what a client needs. It's like, do you want this because you like the solution, or do you want this because you're trying to solve a particular problem? And let's try to open that door. And I feel like consulting in the past for me has really helped me better work with ChatGPT because I can ask it those questions and say, tell me about this. I'm also testing its methodology too. So I'll be like, what makes a good unbiased question? And I'll correct it as it goes to like modify the prompt to me. So it's like, I understand that this is like the best way to ask a unbiased question, but for my situation, I want to ask it in this context because of this, and this. So it's really fun. But yeah, so I guess my non-answer is that there will probably always be visuals, but it will evolve and empower us as humans to interact with technology a lot more effectively. So excited to see what people of different backgrounds can actually achieve by utilizing AI.
Okay, you said something interesting. We don't have we were trying to keep this to an hour and a half or so, but I think we want to dive in. At least I do, because I'm interested in this. You said you think humans interacting with the computer would teach us to interact with one another better. So that's an interesting and a provocative thought in and of itself, I think. To me, the layperson, if I was just thinking about it, I would think, I know that ChatGPT and these LLMs, like, I can misspell things, I can say things out of order, I can kind of just be very loose and rough with my input, and it kind of figures out what I'm saying. That would lead me to believe that it was going to teach me to be lazy with my communication. So were you saying that the communication as our written communication filtered through like an LLM helps that become more clear, concise, maybe considerate of other things that you might not consider? Or are you literally saying, like, I'm going to be able to sit across from a table with Erica and speak with her better because I've been interacting with ChatGPT? Which one were you asserting?
Yeah, so I feel like it's a combination of both almost. So like the last one where it's helping me better understand it helps me better tell people or explain like the context that's missing. And I think that is something that I like to do with ChatGPT. I ask it like, okay, what is it missing? Like, what am I missing? How would you improve this? Tell me why you would improve it. So it's like almost like it's like a tutor that is reading every single thing. So on one hand, it helps me but the thing is, I'm also very curious. So I don't know if everyone would want to do that. And I think there might be some type of laziness where, like, now I'm going back to what I used to do in college, which just word vomit into notes. And then I would spend hours and hours and hours editing it. But now that process is a lot faster because ChatGPT just does all the editing, and then I just correct as I go. So it allows me to also understand like how other things might be perceived more positively. And because I can ask that question and change my answer based on that, I think I'm more effective at describing what I want because I'm constantly reading the newest results of my word vomit. And my word vomit, to be honest, it looks still like the word vomit that I had before. And sometimes I just do it in a voice and I'm just like blah, 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 everything and anything. And I think it's really powerful to pull that into like a singular sentence because it teaches me like, okay, this is what an appropriate structure looks like coming from my voice. Because that's like the biggest struggle for me. Whenever I was word vomiting into everything, it was really challenging to fit the conventional standard because it doesn't, like, that doesn't come naturally. It doesn't click with me. Like, the sentence structures don't click with me. Punctuation doesn't click with me. Letter placement doesn't click with me. It's just how my brain works. And so that's just allowed me to see, like, okay, this is what makes it effective. And you can start seeing behaviors. You can start seeing patterns. This also could be just as a person who loves research. So I'm like spotting all these like similarities. And I'm like, okay, this is how I can communicate that better. Because at the end of the day, I'm actually most of the time drafting out a lot of my meetings beforehand, reading them, making sure I get all the points that I need, and then communicating that effectively. So am I really being lazy? Or am I doing like twice as much work to make sure that a meeting goes well?
Well, it could make some of the things that we should be doing with our communications a little more, I wouldn't want to say accessible, approachable maybe is a better way. Because like you said, you should be preparing for your meetings, going through notes. But if you have an LLM going through all your notes and summarizing for you, it's not going to take you an hour and a half of prep time for that meeting. It might take you 15 minutes. So you will do that, and that thereby enriching your communication experience because you did go through it.
Yeah, and now I'm 2 steps ahead, because instead of spending a whole hour trying to prep for a meeting, now I can spend that time on doing the next step after the meeting. I can spend the time proposing new solutions and working on harder problems. So I think that AI really just helps people do basic things that, sure, we could pay someone to do that. But if you can get that person working on not grunt work or work like intern work, like redlining, instead pay them to solve bigger problems, I think that is way more impactful. Actually, I think one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who said this, might have been even Joe Park, the one of the CTOs, I believe, and he said, like, AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will replace humans because they're just going to be more effective. Like, that's absolutely just the reality. So it's fascinating.
Well,
you can just work on better.
That's how technology. Yeah, I mean, it's how technology has affected human beings over the course of our entire history. You know, now that we have fire, we have more time to sit around and think about things differently. It's always about like freeing up your brain for more think time, I think, is what technology does. So we can get into deeper and deeper thought patterns and thought processes, and then we create new technology, and that frees up even more time, right? So it's interesting how technology affects human beings.
It's like ROI too, right? Like, do I want to pay someone this amount of money to just like edit, copy, and change words, or do I want them to create a language system that allows my company to speak in the same brand voice across our entire global brand? Like, what's going to get you more value? The person editing words or the person defining like your brand voice and like hitting home and adding more value to your overall business? It's kind of how I like to think about it.
I think that's a great segue into our next segment, which is ship it or skip it.
Ship or skip, everybody, we gotta tell us if you ship or skip.
So the first ship it or skip it type topic that we'll address today, since we were just talking about AI, let's do AI generated content. Ship it or skip it. And Erica, since
I'm starting.
You are the guest, you get to start.
User or AI generated content. I would say ship it with lots of disclaimers. Like, literally and figuratively, lots of disclaimers. If you're going to have AI generated content, be transparent about it, and like, get it peer reviewed. It's almost like research. Like, if it's AI generated, you must have it reviewed and make sure that it's in an actual, like, it's telling the truth, because LLMs, they hallucinate, and that if anyone tells you differently, as of right now, that they're totally lying. Like, it totally hallucinates. But what's great about AI is you can ask it, hey, what about this how did you change it from my original prompt? Or did you make anything up? And if you did, why? tell me your reasoning, like walk through that experience with me. So I think it can be really useful. And I'm a big proponent of it because I'm kind of lazy when I write. So
Yeah. I'm gonna be at basically the ship it with an asterisk, right? With the footnote is like, yeah, if it's all checked over. Funny story, my son the other day came up and said Copilot was gaslighting him because he had it generate him an image, and then later in his prompt as he was, having the conversation, it said, I can't do that. And he's like, didn't you generate this image for me? And it was like, no.
that's funny.
I never did that. And I'm like, that's creepy. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value in generating the content, but like anything, it's I would consider it a first draft.
Yeah.
It still needs to be edited down, fact checked, absolutely fact checked. Because I have heard horror stories about it making up answers that aren't true and things like that. So
Misinformation
definitely,
is a real problem. So
yep.
double check
Yeah.
everything. Don't trust anything you read on the internet.
Yeah, I'm on the same lines as you all on the ship or skip, ship it for sure. With asterisk, but the hallucinations are interesting for a computer because like if I'm interacting with someone, like if I'm talking to Aaron and he's making something up as he goes along, I can see his body language. We're kind of built, we over generations and generations of being able to pick up on that sort of thing. But you don't know that the computer, like it says these hallucinations with the utmost confidence. There is no body language to tell you I'm kind of BSing you right now. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's pretty scary stuff. Our last episode, the guest we had, Matt Coatney, was talking about like the hallucinations in the legal industry, where just made up cases like that never existed. Like, oh, here's some precedent for you, judge. No, actually, that's not a case. It never even existed, but it was very confident, and it said, oh, you should cite this. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. All right. Yes. Yeah. But when it makes up its citations, I mean, you have to go and check them, right? Of course, right? But I think it made up oh, you should reference, finders versus keepers, whatever, right? I think I made that joke last time, but it's pretty interesting. Okay, what's next, Aaron?
Let's do designs as requirements. So this kind of leans into the UI and UX area of having a design as a standalone requirement.
No.
Like just the visual, like the pictures and stuff?
Yeah, like,
Okay.
like your Figma. Like, this is the requirement. Make it look like this and do it.
No. Hard cancel on that. I think it's UI does not encompass business cases, research. It doesn't have the context to do it effectively or the foresight to do it well. So just building a button that looks like the standard button isn't going to account for language and color and label and also I think it's just unfair to have design as a requirement because it's expensive. It's more expensive to create a Figma file than it is just to write a document. Just get ChatGPT to write you a PRD, or product requirement document, and pair it. So hard pass for design being the requirement.
I have to agree. I don't think just having the picture is enough. There are, as a developer, there's nuance as you're going through and implementing a solution, understanding the why. What am I getting at here? That developers are creative, right? Giving them a little bit of creative license to think along the way, and not just try to be pixel perfect to an image. You ask for pixel perfect to an image, you guess what you're going to get. Pixel perfect to an image. We've had, you hear the horror stories. Add a button to the screen as your requirement, just as the text or whatever. Okay, the button's there. You click it, it doesn't do anything, right? Like we can be very literal jerks sometimes when but yeah, I think I agree with you. The context, the why, I think is always very important. Understanding that outcome you're looking for. What are you trying to? What experience are you building for this user? All of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, implementation is more than just what it looks like at the end.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be on board with that as a skip. But I do think it's important to have them as part of your requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of yes, have an idea, because that picture is worth 1,000 words. So make your requirement 1,100 words, right? So have your this is what I expect it to do written out, and then have the picture to support it so that you can put all the pieces together. Because I have found that knowing what a product owner or designer is thinking with their pictures is helpful. Kind of like you were talking about with the button, right? Having the image and the text is more effective than one or the other. So I think it is a not having it as a requirement, but having it support the requirement.
Yeah, showing intent, right? We want the intention to be very clear, and we'd rather have the intent clear. I'd rather have a fuzzy UI with clear intentions, because that means that, yeah, there's just some opportunity for improvement if need be.
Have you ever read those like for user interface requirements where it is literally just words like, I need a button that is 160 pixels wide and has this sort of arc, blah, 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 rounded edges. Like,
at that point, get AI to build it for you.
Like, come on, let's just build the stupid button for me. If you're having to go through all that, writing all that out is a lot slower than just building the visual, the graphic itself. Just give me that and I'll just pluck it in for you. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, the last one we'll do today is one that I think maybe we won't agree on. I don't know. We'll see. Hallway testing.
Hallway testing. I would say it's another asterisk one. So hallway testing is really, I would say it's a very useful tactic when you don't have quick access to your users. So if you want like general usability testing, you can use a hallway test to get you like 10% of the way there. But what you have to understand, if you're testing with people literally in the hallway, they bring biases because they likely work at the company that you work at. They might have deep understanding of how data models work. And so, sure, they might be able to get you in the right direction of like a placement of a button, but the moment that they get into like strategic, oh, I'm going to build a menu in this way, it fails because you're designing for someone with a deep knowledge of the system, but it's not like true usability. Like if you wanted actual usability, learnability, and we even do this, like don't test with Taco Bell employees all the time. Not saying you should always test with your users. That's going to give you the most risk adverse like direction. But yeah, I think you can test with other brands as well to see if like, okay, for usability, can this be learned and without context? And then can this be learned with context? I think it's really important to like make a distinguish between those. So it's good when you don't have anything else to go off of and you need some type of like second pair of eyes, because let's be honest, when you're designing in a vacuum or just looking at something for more than 2 hours, you're likely going to make decisions that you maybe wouldn't have if you had a fresh perspective. So it's like a yes, but.
Yeah, I'm gonna be on the skip it train on this one, because I think to a lot of the same points, you're not going to get an unbiased result from your peers because they already know too much, right? If you're designing something most likely your hallways are going to be packed with people that know the project that you're on, know what you're working on, and are expecting to see certain things, or are used to an older version of the product because they've been trained on it at some point. And I don't think you're going to get that fresh pair of eyes. I will say though, it's important to get peer reviews of it is like, what do you think of this? As more of like a review step, which, anything that's design coded or thing, I think it's always good to have a second pair of eyes kind of look at it. It's like, am I crazy, or is this actually look like it's going to work? So for hallway testing, I'm pretty much a skip it. Go ahead and hit your user base, get some fresh eyes on it, and do your normal testing. And
hallway tests are better for like dry runs of your tests that you're going to be testing with real people.
Okay. So, all right, for the listeners, both of them, what distinguishes a hallway test from a traditional user test? Like, what? I mean, I guess based on the context, I guess I can infer what it is. But like, explain what is the definition of what a hallway test is? And for one of the hosts, he might need education on what you're talking about, because I've never heard that term.
Yeah, I guess hallway tests, and I think this really does depend on like the situation. Hallway test implies you want to do a usability test on someone on your team, and potentially you want to like, well, I guess maybe that there's assumptions. So maybe I won't say the assumption, but like it's essentially you are testing an experience with a colleague instead of testing with, or maybe not instead, but versus testing with a actual user or someone who doesn't have the deep understanding of the business and its operations.
In the term comes from, you walk down the hallway, you grab somebody and say, "Hey, I want you to test this." Yeah.
User testing is more like I know exactly who I'm testing. I'm doing a giant like filter. Like I'm only looking for Taco Bell employees who've been in that company for more than a month and understands how the restaurant operates just in general in store with fulfilling orders. Like when a hallway test, it's like I talk to my dev who knows the schema, and you're not going to get the same results. It's just it's not real. You might get some perspective, but then you get into like designing by committee, which can be like really annoying and not an effective use of time. But there are some use cases, I would say, where like having peers look it over and maybe say, oh, well, this is going to be too expensive to build. Well, so that's like the difference. It's like the person usability testing with the people that might use it, or an unbiased audience that might not need to use it versus your colleague.
Outside your user community, someone outside the user. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it would be interesting. So like I'm a developer, so I think of in terms of feedback loops. Unit tests are quicker and you get your answer. But the problem with, if you're going to rely on a hallway test to kind of short circuit getting to that real user test, you may throw some things out that where a fellow developer, I might go to Aaron and say, "What do you think of this screen?" He goes, "Oh my gosh, that's disgusting. That's gross." But if you really put it in front of the real user, they're going, "Oh my gosh, that solves my problem. This is beautiful. I love this." So I would be wary of that. I definitely wouldn't use it as a way to short circuit, but it could be more holistic view of the product, but ultimately you have to change those users' lives, so you really want to focus on that. So I would say skip, probably. Mm-hmm. That's what I would guess.
Yeah, I think it depends on like your intent. If your intentions are clear and clean, like I'm asking feedback so I can get another diverse perspective, versus I'm asking you as my coworker if this is going to fit within the mental model of all thousands of our users, that's going to be the time where it's like, okay, your intentions are not good. You're trying to skip a potentially very expensive process.
So, yeah, but I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm just trying to get to the helicopter targeting system testing thing. Like that's where I'm trying to get to as quickly as possible. I want to use that. I would love to sit in the cockpit of what are those, the Apaches do that. Yeah, like that would be so cool to be able to see that in action. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to get to is that. But yeah. All right. Is that the last?
That was the last one we're going to do. So it's time for our most serious part of the podcast, the lightning round.
Okay.
It's time for the lightning round.
So the way the lightning round works, we're going to ask you a series of hard-hitting questions. We'll each take 5 pot shots at you to see how you survive. Try and keep these short. No description or no embellishment is needed. We're looking for rapid-fire answers. And some of these do have right and wrong answers.
And you will
will
be graded accordingly.
Yes, you will be graded accordingly. I was going to say judged harshly, but graded accordingly is a little bit
Bring
nicer.
it on. Ready for a challenge.
All right. So I will start things off with your first question. What's your favorite carb? Bread, pasta, rice, or potatoes?
Bread.
Do you like the smell of gasoline?
Yes.
Do you believe in love at first sight?
Yes.
Did you go to sleepaway summer camp as a kid?
Yes.
Do you like the name Charlie for a girl?
Yes.
Can you say "good day, mate" in an Australian accent? And I had to slow that down so that I didn't do it in an Australian accent. So can you say "good day, mate" in an Australian accent?
Good day or good day, mate. Nope, I can't. Nope. Good day, mate. Maybe I should add an R. R. Good day, mate.
That's fantastic.
Ask for permission or beg forgiveness?
Forgiveness.
What's a country you'd be okay never visiting in your life?
I don't know.
You're such an inclusive person. This is going to strain your brain.
Like my brain doesn't know. Every country that pops in my head, I'm like, nope. I would say the moon.
Okay. No atmosphere there, anyway. As Aaron pointed out.
Exactly.
So since we failed on the Australian dialect, we'll try a different dialect. What sound does a seal make?
Arr, arr, arr.
See, there we go. Now we
done.
got an accent.
Well done.
Well, quick recommendation for any art schools: that should be your like mascot, because it's like art, art.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love it.
I totally give credit to my husband for that. He's the one who made that joke.
Oh, I
like
love
that.
it. That's great.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you enjoy garlic?
Oh my gosh, 40.
Okay, that's we would have accepted that as well. Yeah.
That completes the lightning round.
Did I get an A or a B or what was my
I
grade?
think that was a solid effort. I think missing the Australian accent gets you in at an A minus.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
I'll work on it for next time.
This has been the / where we lean into the future of IT. Thank you to our guest, Erica Price, for the great talk on UX and UI at Yum. Also, thanks to my beautiful co-host, James Carmen. I'm Aaron Chesney. Please subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes, and always stay curious.